We therefore need to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of this land. We also pay our respects to the Aboriginal elders, both past and present, and further extend that respect to other adults who have joined us today. Council prayer. Lord, we ask that you watch over this council, guide us in our deliberations and decisions for the benefit of all people of our shire, Australia. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Okay, so I'll do a roll call first before we start. Councillor Hawkins.
Yes.
Councillor Cudmore.
Present.
Councillor Lobsey.
Present.
Councillor Webster.
Present.
Councillor Miles.
Present.
Councillor Black.
Present.
General Manager.
Present.
Director of Works.
Present.
Director of Environmental Services.
Present.
And we also have 3 other members of staff present. We have Kian Middleton, we have Barry Stricken, and we can't do it without Brooke. Welcome everybody. Okay, so audio recordings of the meetings. Consistent with Section 747A of the Local Government Act 1993 and Public Health COVID-19 gatherings, Order 2020. This meeting at Liverpool Clyde Shire Council is being held remotely using audio-visual links. As with ordinary meetings conducted in person, Council's Code of Meeting Practice applies to today's proceedings. A webcast of this meeting will be published to Council's website at lpnc.newsouthwales.gov.au, so that it is available for viewing by members of the public. While Section 747A of the Act and the Public Health Order remain in force, Council will not be facilitating a public forum. During this period, members of the public can still provide feedback on matters being considered by Council by providing submissions and comment via email. For further information about Council meetings, please visit Council's website at lpsc.newsouthwales.gov.au. And I think I missed a bit to say that this is the ordinary meeting of Council held on Wednesday, the 27th of May 2020 at 2:30 p.m. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is apologies and applications for leave of absence by Council. There has been received, so we'll move on. Confirmation of the minutes of the Council meeting held on the 22nd of April 2020. Have a mover of those minutes.
Move.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Do I have some? Thank you, Councillor Hawkins.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Black?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Wish to speak to it, Councillor Hawkins?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Do any of the councillors wish to speak to it?
No.
Councillor
No.
Cutler?
No, thank you.
Councillor Lobsey?
No.
Councillor Webster?
No.
Councillor Miles?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Now put the motion. All those in favour? And I think if you raise your hand, because everybody can see you, that should cover us off. So all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the next item is the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 8th of May 2020 to be adopted. Somebody happy to move that one?
So
Happy to
moved.
move that, Councillor Lobsey.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Thank you, Councillor Lobsey. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Hawkins?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Wish to speak to it, Councillor Lobsey?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions or comments from the councillors? If not, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is disclosures of interest. Are there any councillors wish to disclose any interest in business paper? Council.
Mr. Mayor, I have a property that I own is mentioned in the heritage study.
Thank you,
Councillor Webster.
Would we please have the interest of a property within the heritage study? Any other councillors with any disclosures of interest? Councillor Black.
No.
Councillor Miles.
Nothing to disclose, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hawkins.
Nothing to disclose.
Councillor Cudmore.
No, nothing.
Councillor Lobsey.
No, nothing.
Minister. No. Services.
No.
Thank you. There being no further disclosures of interest, somebody have to move that, please.
Opposed?
Thank you, councillor Black. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Moles.
Thank you, councillor Miles. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 5.1, the mayoral minute for mayoral activities, and there is a recommendation there to receive and note the mayoral minute and no further action to be taken. I'll put that up as to receive and note, oh, I've missed it. To receive and note the mayoral minute, and I'm recommending that there be no further actions taken on the issue in the mayoral minute. Happy to.
Councillor Moles, happy to second that.
Thank you. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Oh, okay, yeah. Beg your pardon. Sorry, I might like to move 5.1, the mayoral minutes activities for the month, and there is a recommendation to receive and note the mayoral activities for the month.
So moved. Councillor Hawkins.
Seconder?
I'll second it. Councillor Cudmore.
Cardinal? Any questions, comments?
No.
Motion, all those in favour, show of hands, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we're back on track. Okay, the next item is inward correspondence and petitions. There's a recommendation that council receive and note the correspondence 1 to 4 inclusive. Somebody happy to move those?
So moved. Councillor Lobsy.
Thank you, councillor Lobsy. Thank you, councillor Black. Do you wish to speak to it, councillor Lobsy?
No. Thanks.
Speak to it, councillor Black.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
The other councillors wish to speak to it? If not, I now put the motion. All those in favour, show of hands, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next item, 7.1, investments for April 26. There's a recommendation to receive and note the report. Somebody happy to move that report?
Councillor Cudmore, I'll move it.
Thank you, councillor Black. Thank you, councillor Cudmore. Do you wish to speak to it, councillor Black?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Wish to speak to it, councillor Cudmore?
No, thank you.
Any questions or comments on the council's investments? If not, I now put the motion. All those in favour, show of hands, please, so the community can see. Carried unanimously. Thank you. A lot easier when we can see all of us. Okay, the next item is 7.2, the Executive Area Works Report. And there is a recommendation to receive and note the Executive Area Works Report. Somebody happy to move the Executive Area Works Report?
Move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillor Black. Do I have a seconder? Thank you,
Seconded.
Lobsy.
Councillor Lobsy.
You wish to speak to it, councillor Black?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. To the General Manager and her team, I wish to acknowledge the significant amount of work that has gone into this particular report, and obviously all of the actions that have been undertaken as a result. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Black. Any further questions or comments from any of the councillors? If not, I now put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 7.3, the draft COVID-19 lessening and licensing financial policy. I'll just briefly recommendation to the members of the community that are listening. This policy is a policy that council is engaged to know that we deal fairly with anybody that rents or has premises owned by council that is asking for assistance, and that's a policy that the government minute we have so that we handle everybody with fairness and equity. So I'll now ask that somebody move the recommendation in 3 parts, and the first part of the recommendation is acknowledge the adoption of the National Cabinet Mandatory Code of Conduct, Small and Medium Enterprise Commercial Leasing Principles COVID-19 contained in Annexure 1. Part 2, adopt the draft COVID-19 lessee and licensee financial relief policy contained in Annex 2. 3, provide public exhibition of the adoption of the draft COVID-19 lessee and licensee financial policy. Before I ask for removal, I'll just explain that this policy will be going on public exhibition for the period of 30 days, in which any member of the public can view it on our website. Is happy to put submissions via writing during COVID-19 to council should they wish. I'll now ask that somebody move those recommendations 1 to 3 as they stand.
Councillor Black. Move.
Councillor Black, do I have a seconder?
Councillor Cudmore.
Thank you, Councillor Cudmore. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Black?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Cudmore?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak for or against it? If not, I'll put the motion. Show of hands, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 7.4, appointment of a native title manager. There is a two-part recommendation. Part 1 is pursuant to section 8.6 of the Crown Lands Management Act 2016, delegate to Council's Corporate Strategy Coordinator, Ms Rosalind Tenbrink, the functions and responsibilities of the native title manager. 2, pursuant to section 8.8 of the Crown Lands Management Act 2016, notify the Minister of Water, Property and Housing, the Honourable Melinda Pavey MP, of the delegation's approval in clause 1 of this resolution. Somebody happy to move that recommendation as it stands?
Happy to move that, Councillor Lobsey.
Thank you, Councillor Lobsey. Do I have a seconder?
Seconder, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Lobsey?
No.
You wish to speak to it, Councillor Black?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This, as was discussed this morning, is a temporary decision that's being made and until we get another manager. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
And also, just before we move past this, I'd just like to note the amount of work that Ms Tenbrink has done in this area and the amount of training that she's had to be able to do this work. And I'd like to, on behalf of the councillors, thank Rosalind for her efforts above and beyond in this place. I'd now like to put this motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.5 is management of Crown Land Reserves. There is a two-part recommendation once again. Part 1 is apply to the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, Crown Lands, requesting council be appointed Crown Land Manager for the following Crown Land Reserves. Reserve R59034, Currabubula Hall. Reserve R88516, Campbell Street Shared Pathway, RSL Park. Reserve R60682, Ye Olde Cricket Pitch. Wollabadar School of Arts, Wollabadar Hall. Reserve R97714, Part Corindi Cemetery. Part 2 of the recommendation is pursuant to section 25 of the Local Government Act 1993. Request these Crown Land Reserves be classified as the following. R59034 Currabubula Hall be classified as community land. Reserve R88516 Campbell Street Shared Pathway, RSL Park, community land. Reserve R60682 Ye Olde Cricket Pitch, operational land. Wollabadar School of Arts, Wollabadar Hall, community land. Reserve R97714 Park Corindi Cemetery, operational lands. Just before I ask for removal of this, I'll explain to the members of the community that are listening. These are not new parcels of land or new things council are taking on. They are reserves and things we have always looked after, and we are just formalising the new documentation of this as per the Crown Lands Act and making it formal. And once again, I'd like to applaud the staff for the amount of work that's gone into identifying these and sorting them out. And I'd also like to clarify that there are the uses of these being operational land or community land. Operational land is council land that council uses to carry out its business and in short may be sold or not. Community land is owned by the community, like your parks and those sort of things, and remains community land and cannot be disposed of, is the basic nutshell of it. So I'll now ask that somebody move those recommendations, part 1 and part 2.
Move.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Hawkins. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Black?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Wish to speak to it, Councillor Hawkins?
No, Mr Mayor.
Any further questions or comments or queries from the councillors? Not now. The motion, all those in favour, hands please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. 7.6 Environmental and Economic Development Services Works Report, April 2020. There is a recommendation that council receive and note. And once again, I'd like to point out the amount of work that these reports to us councillors every month upon the operationals of the different departments. Somebody please move this report.
Councillor Moles, happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Do I have a seconder?
Move.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Miles?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Black, do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors have any questions on the Environmental Economic Development Services Works Report?
No.
Not, now put the motion. All those in favour? Show of hands, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 7.7, a request for COVID-19 subsidy for the venue hires and charges. The members of the communities out there, we have had a community sporting group write to council requesting some assistance due to COVID-19 for some relief on some higher fees of our grounds. The recommendation that we're going to put forward is self-explanatory, but it asks the sporting group to consider applying to our community funding program for support. So the recommendation is in two parts. One is to receive and note the report. The second one is council write to all sporting user organisations and formally advise them of the availability of the funding support program. Have I got a councillor happy to move that?
Move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Black?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Hawkins?
No, Mr Mayor.
Just before I put this motion, I'd just like to, for those members of the community listening or watching, say that if you intend on applying for any of these council support programs, please go online and look at where the deadlines are and what you have to put in. Please make sure you fill in all the forms completely so that council can consider these in one go and hopefully come back with a determination. So now put the motion. All those councillors in favour? Show of hands, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. 7.8, adoption of the local strategic planning statement. There is one recommendation. Council adopts the local strategic planning statement presented public notice of council decision documents on the New South Wales planning portal. Do I have somebody happy to move that recommendation?
Mr Mayor, I would like to move that we defer
No,
the,
different.
You've got the wrong one, Councillor Hawkins.
Different one, mate.
different one, is it? Sorry.
I'll do it again. 7.8 is the adoption.
Mr Mayor, the audio here is breaking up. I don't know what's happening. It was all right before, but I'm barely able to get what you're saying.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, we're on item 7.8, which is the adoption of the local strategic planning statement. There is a recommendation. 1, council adopts the local strategic planning statement as presented, gives public notice of council's decision and publishes the LPSC documents on the New South Wales planning portal. Somebody has to move that recommendation as it stands.
Happy to move that.
Thank you, Councillor Cudmore. Do I have a seconder?
Move.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Cudmore?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Black.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak to this comment or query?
No.
Thank you, councillors. I now put the motion. All those in favour, show of hands, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.9, adoption of recreation strategy and master plans. There is a four-part recommendation. It reads: 1, receive and note the Director of Environmental and Economic Development Services report. 2, Director of Environmental and Economic Development Services to make changes to the recreation strategy and associated master plans as outlined in Annexure A. 3, formally adopt the strategy as amended. 4, give notice of its decision in the local newspaper and advise all submitters of the decision. If somebody is happy to move this recommendation.
Mr Mayor, I would like to move that we defer the decision on this motion until the end of the June meeting, in order to have further consultation with the members of the public. And also, I refer the councillors to the recent emails and letters that have come in. So I would like to move that we defer this decision until the June meeting.
Councillor Cudmore, I'm happy to move it as it is.
Hang on a minute, guys. Councillor Hawkins has put up a motion. I'm asking that, is anybody prepared to move the motion as it stands first?
Yes, Councillor Cudmore.
Councillor Cudmore. I'm asking for a seconder of the motion.
Councillor Moles, happy to second it.
Is any councillor wish to speak against it or recommend an amendment to the motion?
Yes, councillor Hawkins, I would like to move an amendment to that motion that we hold off on the decision on that until the June meeting.
Thank you, councillor Hawkins. Councillor Cudmore, are you prepared to accept that amendment?
No, I don't think we're going to do anything between here and June. There's nothing going to change. We can't have any meetings till here to June. We just delay the inevitable.
Any other councillors wish to speak for or against the motion?
Councillor Moles, Mr Mayor.
You seconded it, councillor Moles. You wish to speak to it?
I do, Mr Mayor. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, listen, I'd like to speak in favour of the current motion. With all respects to Councillor Hawkins, I don't believe that was an amendment to the motion. I believe that was a new motion. An amendment is basically to change some wording or to add something to it. But Councillor Hawkins' motion is actually in opposition to it. So it's actually a new motion, not an amendment. So just on those grounds, I'd just like to speak in favour of the motion that this document is very comprehensive. It's 97 pages. It's taken 2 years to develop. It has had extensive consultation, although not enough, and I'll admit that we probably need to do more. I believe it's a starting point and we need to adopt something to start with, and it has some great ideas and great goals for council to try to achieve. When funding becomes available, I believe we should be going back to the public to have further talks with the user groups and other other Shire residents before we make any firm decisions. But I'm totally in favour of moving the motion as it is. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion?
Councillor Black.
Councillor Black, you have the floor.
I would like to move an amendment. I'm absolutely in favour of the master plan and its strategy, and I concur with every other councillor that this has been an enormous amount of work, and I thank all of the staff involved in doing this over the last couple of years. However, as was discussed this morning, that it's very clear that there are a number of persons within the community that do not have a handle on what this is all about. They think that this plan is enshrined in stone and that it's not going to be able to be tweaked or moved in any way, shape or form. So I would like to see an amendment to the motion that that council actually place within the next 30 days some form of advertising, whether that be on Facebook or wherever it may be, to inform the public as to what the actual process of this means, because I do not believe that all of the community totally understand it.
So, councillor Black, I'll defer to the GM to speak to this because an amendment needs to be clear. I'll defer to the GM.
So, thank you for that, Councillor Black. In terms of the action that you're wanting to undertake, I can take that as a direction from Council to provide a more detailed explanation via media and via other forms of communication, rather than putting that as an amendment to the motion. So that action can be undertaken, absolutely, but wouldn't necessarily require an amendment to the motion. So I would take that as a direction from council.
So my question is, will you therefore then take this as a direction from council?
It's not. Look, I'm not clear whether we can take a direction from a council meeting without it being part of a motion. I'm struggling to get my head around this. My understanding is we're adopting a recommendation here. There's a recommendation being put in four parts. An amendment to that recommendation would be an add-on, so it would have the recommendation standing and may have a line item 5 saying that council would require, as passing this, further community consultation, or it may council would require some publicity. But an amendment, Councillor Moles is correct, is a slight adjustment to what is put up, or an additional instruction. Not a complete, excuse me, not a complete. The process, if you wish to have a new recommendation, is you put this one to the floor for a vote. If it passes, it passes. If it fails, it fails. If it fails, you can then put up an alternative recommendation.
I'm happy with that.
So that's where we stand with it. At the moment, as far as I'm concerned as chair, we have a mover of the recommendation of extension, Councillor Cudmore. We have a seconder in Councillor Moles, and we have two councillors that have spoken against it, or wanting things added to it, but we don't have a clear amendment. Does any councillor wish to put forward a clear amendment to this?
Mr. Mayor, is this not an amendment? This is just an observation from our discussions this morning. It appears that the public think that what this strategy is that we're going to do all this. This is not what we are going to do. This is what we would like to do if we get funding. I think that's the important thing. And I think that's where the community may be a bit concerned that we're rushing ahead and spending all this money. We will have to look at every one of these when we get funding for the particular project, and then we will have extensive discussions and consultation with the community on whatever project gets up. So that's I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Webster?
No, thanks.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, I'll now put the motion as it stands. All those in favour? Show of hands. We have Councillor Cudmore, Councillor Lobsey and Councillor Moles. All those against? Councillor Webster, Councillor Black and Councillor Hawkins. We have a tied vote of the councillors, which means me to split the vote, and I'm happy to adopt the recommendation as it stands. So the vote is now passed. The recommendation is as seen in the paper and is adopted by 4 votes to 3. Thank you, Councillor. Next item on the agenda is 7.1, adopting the community-based heritage planning study. There is a recommendation. 1, Council adopts a Liverpool Plains community-based heritage study. Notice of the decision. Do I have a mover of that?
Councillor Moles, happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Moles. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Cudmore will second it.
Thank you, Councillor Cudmore. You wish to speak to it, Councillor Moles?
Only to say, Mr. Mayor, that it's a very good document, and our Heritage Advisor needs to be congratulated on its content. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Cudmore?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other councillors wish to speak to it?
No.
Right, I now put the motion. All those in favour? Show of hands, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item is 7.11, 2019-20 Capital Progress Report. Excuse me. There is a recommendation that the report be received and noted. prior to doing that, I would just like to thank the directors of the various departments for this report and the progress and the fact that we, at this stage, appear to be going to deliver everything on time and on schedule and possibly on budget. So, again, thank you very much. We'll now ask for somebody to move that recommendation.
Yeah, I'll move it. Councillor Cudmore.
Thank you, Councillor Cudmore. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Webster. Wish to speak to it, Councillor Cudmore.
No, thank you. No, very good report.
Councillor Webster.
Only, Mr Mayor, just on the issue we discussed this morning, the tennis courts and basketball courts, can we have a report clarifying for the GenMet, clarifying the actual grants and how they're to be spent on the basketball courts and on sort of Milner Parade tennis court for the June meeting? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webster. Are you happy with that amendment, Councillor Webster, Councillor Cudmore, to add a report for the June meeting?
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Cudmore. Any councillor wish to speak to this matter? Not, I now put the motion in the two-part motion that council adopts Liverpool Plains Community, that the report be received and that a further report on the tennis courts project be tabled for the June meeting. Show of hands, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Next item is 7.12, water supply status report. There is a recommendation that change water conservation measures in from level 2 to level 10, effective the 3rd of June 2020. And once again, just before I move this, I'd like to thank Rod's water team. I know they had an extremely challenging job at Wallabigar to get that water back online and safe for human consumption. And I believe, all things considered, that we were in drought and what we had to deal with, we've done an outstanding job. So on behalf of the council, thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Could we have somebody move this, please?
Happy to move it.
Thank you, Councillor Lobsey. Thank you, Councillor Black. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Lobsey?
No, I don't wish to speak to it, please.
Councillor Black?
No, thank you.
Anybody wish to speak to it? If not, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Okay. The next item is 7.13, is a smoke-free review. There is a recommendation that council adopt a smoke-free policy, and just before we do this, I'll make it clear to members of the community, this is not about community spaces or the main street. This is a policy for the staff and council on how we will cater to those who do or don't smoke, and we will do it with workplace health and safety in mind of all our staff. So I'll now put this, I'll ask somebody to move the motion. Thank you, Councillor Black. Seconder?
Councillor Moles.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Black?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Wish to speak to it, Councillor Hawkins?
No, Mr Mayor.
Does any other councillor wish to speak to this? If not, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. There is no notices of motions or questions with notice. Just before we move on to this one, I'd like to flag that I was approached by a ratepayer this morning, Mr Peter Wills, with an intention of putting a notice of motion to council's next meeting around about the gas pipeline, and I've told Mr Wills to put it in writing and to present it to management, and will be dealt with accordingly from there. But just flagging for the councillors that it is coming. Okay.
Mr Mayor, before you go on, we're going to confidential, can I suggest that we look at doing some Wi-Fi microphones or something? Because the audio is really, really bad. So Councillor Hawkins brought it up earlier. As soon as you turn away to your papers, we lose the audio. Okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Hopefully by the next meeting we'll have that problem solved.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, if there's no further matters, I'll now ask for a motion to move into confidential.
So moved, Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Black, I think it was. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried unanimously. If we could switch the microphones and the recordings off. Just hang in there for a minute, guys.